President. And I'll rise to make a short contribution on the bill. Reassure everyone.
Sorry. There are no time limits here, honourable member.
Oh, really? Oh,
not yet.
I wasn't aware.
Not yet.
Yes. Give me time. I'm very pleased to speak on the bill. This certainly, as many others have noted, has been quite a long time coming and is obviously well discussed for a long period of time in this state. I'm in thorough agreement with the object of the bill to quite simply reduce our litter, increase our recycling, and that's very much in context, I think, with lots of outcomes we want for our state. And I have appreciated the briefings that have been provided and the time that's been made available for that from all who've contributed their expertise, their thoughts, their concerns and questions and their information. So my appreciation for that on the record. I've also found it particularly informative and useful to hear the contributions of other members. So I thank those members who have made extensive contributions on this bill, and particularly for the work they've done putting a lot of questions to the leader. So there'll be a really substantial amount that comes back through the summary that the leader will provide. And that's covered a lot of areas that I too would like to just hear more about and certainly have on the record as part of this process. So I won't need to add to that too much in my contribution at all. I also acknowledge the many representations that have been made to us from a whole range of groups and community members, business owners, environmental groups, not-for-profits, and also direct information provided from the Minister and from departmental folk as well. Members have provided many of those into the record here in their contributions. We've had a lot read in, and I think that's a really good representation of the different communications that we've received and the breadth of information that's been provided. So again, I won't need to add to that in my contribution. I think it's pleasing that there is, at least on a very fundamental question here, no real disagreement. We are all very interested to see a scheme in place. And really what we have then is our key question being, what kind of scheme? We're very fortunate to be able to look to other states to look and learn from what has played out there and from the experiences that they've had. We're fortunate to be able to draw on a body of work, a considerable body of work that has been provided through research and through policy development as well, so that we can be informed in this decision making. So other than those very clear main aims of the scheme and the objects of this bill before us, the other areas that I've noted that have come up for some questions and some differences of opinion, including, certainly not limited to, matters around appropriate governance, matters around cost, around level of returns and whether that's legislated, around the involvement of the not-for-profit sector and sporting groups and the like, collection points, how those are organised and where they are located, employment outcomes that might be derived from whatever scheme is in place, and many more of these sorts of matters, which I see as sort of the secondary matters that fall out of the decisions around the scheme. We've received representations that cover many of those, and there are still some different views and opinions provided, and certainly facts and alternative facts, which can sometimes be a little bewildering. So from my assessment, as I've engaged with that material, I've found that looking through the material provided, looking through the information available, on some of those things I've been able to feel, I've felt that I've been able to arrive at a defensible view where I feel quite confident in an appropriate way forward. On some of the others, I'm still less clear, and I think probably some questions that have been asked here today and answers we might receive may assist with clarifying further on some of those. And so I'm at a point where I'm relatively clear about how I feel about this and what model we should have going forward. But to add to that and add to my confidence in thinking about where I put my support with a vote on this, I also look to process. As you will appreciate, Mr President and other members here, I'm always interested in how we got here. And so that was, I think, quite useful for me not diving as deeply into the content of this topic as, say, the member for Launceston has, who's just shared that with us in detail. I'm mostly interested to get confidence from the process itself. Have we assessed? Have we followed a process that allows us to arrive at this decision point with the matter in this bill that we can support? So my understanding of the process is that it's been a relatively robust one so far. We know there's a long history of the discussion of the topic, decades even by the sound of it. We know that there's been some distinct reports provided. The Marsden-Jacobs report has been mentioned already. Extensive work done by the Department of the EPA, and that was informed and engaged with an expert reference group. From the description that we've been given was inclusive of all sides of this issue and all those who have interests in it, from financial interests through to just, values interests in it as well. And that expert reference group had the opportunity to thoroughly engage during the policy development process, provide information and views, provide expertise. And then we came to that decision about what model. And my understanding is that a decision was made on a preferred model, but then we had another stage of somewhat arm's length assessment provided. And that was an interesting choice. It wouldn't necessarily be my preferred choice for that sort of arm's length assessment, but I think it sounds like it was undertaken in good faith and with thoroughness. So the ministerial advisory group that was put together, made up of people who had no vested interest in the outcome, who were tasked with reassessing the 4 clear options that could have been contemplated. My understanding is that advisory group was provided with extensive information and undertook a fairly thorough analysis of the options. I believe that they were asked from the discussion we had in our briefing with members of that Ministers' Advisory Group. They were asked to take into consideration the small scale of Tasmania, the relatively small scale of our waste and recycling industries, those downstream processing and export matters, the local business and services matters. They looked at the evidence that was provided to them, and where they landed was their assessment of what provided the best balance, the best opportunity for our market, and would drive the best outcomes at the lowest cost. So that sounded quite a comprehensive process, and they squarely landed in support of the split governance model. And I found that to be convincing, hearing about that process and hearing about that somewhat arm's length assessment made by people who weren't in a position to benefit financially and have that vested interest in it. So I was reassured by that. Without going extensively into those pros and cons here, I know others have done a bit of that already. My reassurance, the reassurance I derived from hearing about that process came about because I feel like across what led us to that and then that final stage of arm's length reassessment provided a robust and defensible pathway to the decision of where we are now with this split governance model. And I must say I find that split governance model quite appealing and reassuring in itself, because I think it has that inbuilt accountability. We've heard about that already, where the scheme coordinator is incentivised to keep costs low, the network operator is incentivised to ensure maximum containers are returned, and you've got that sort of balance, in a sense, between those 2 roles being involved at that governance level. I believe that has a lot of inbuilt appeal as an effective model for our state. And then, of course, we were able to look to New South Wales, and then I believe Victoria's bringing it online, and ACT also. So we've got some to look to that are already established there in New South Wales, and others where decision-making has obviously already occurred as to the best options for those jurisdictions, and they've made some similar decisions. Now, that's not to say we should always follow other jurisdictions. We must always look at our unique circumstances here in this state and make our own assessments. But when I look at this process followed, I feel relatively confident about these steps that have been taken to arrive us at this decision. I'm reassured by some of the other material provided and information provided about the sorts of discussions that have been engaged with say, the small beverage producers in this state, and the efforts to look for measures to put in place to assist them not to be disadvantaged by this scheme to an unnecessary degree. I think there's probably more conversations to be had around those sorts of areas. And I think there's probably some other implementation matters, certainly, which will no doubt need to be tackled. The 12-month implementation period that seems to be the anticipated time it's going to take sounds reasonable and responsible, especially as we gather through the briefings that New South Wales, which had a short implementation period, 4 months, I believe, ran into some troubles then, some bumps along the road in the early days after implementation because of that probably slightly rushed period. So it sounds like we're taking a responsible approach in that sense. And no doubt some of those other matters across that implementation time can be ironed out, although we'll be wanting to watch carefully and hear from people who are involved as to how they see that developing over time. On the matter of the suggestion around an inquiry, I'm not convinced of the need for an inquiry at this time. I'll certainly hear arguments put for it if one is moved for. I don't know that an inquiry by the Parliament will do more than rehash. Now, there's potentially value in that, because what a parliamentary mechanism like an inquiry provides, as we all know, is it's a very public, on the record, transparent and accountable way for a matter to be looked at and assessed. Anyone can engage with it and come forward to participate in a parliamentary inquiry process through submissions, through hearings and the like. It all becomes a matter of public record. And our Parliament, as the ultimate decision makers on a piece of legislation, are drivers of that process, rather than the political drivers of the process of, say, a policy development, the policy development that has happened to date. So I don't discount the value of a potential inquiry, and I will always listen to arguments put for the need for one or the value of having one. In this case, I'm not yet convinced about it when I've thought it through for myself. I would be, on the balance of things right now, happy to support this bill through to the next committee stage for it to be considered, and I understand there may be potentially amendments brought to it. I'll be very interested to engage with those also if there are some. So that's my brief contribution on this. I certainly thank other members for the more extensive contributions that they made, and I'm looking forward to the summing up to hear the answers to some of the very good questions that have been put during those contributions.